my name is Paola Juarez, and this is my Capstone Symposium presentation. My project titled From Barriers to Accessibility, Making Environmental Stewardship More Inclusive. To get started, environmental stewardship, defined as connection and protection to the natural environment through sustainability practices to conserve ecosystem resilience, is important for addressing environmental challenges. However, not all communities have equitable access to environmental opportunities or knowledge. Structural and social barriers can limit human nature participation. Therefore, this project investigates which barriers most affect volunteer engagement and how organizations can improve accessibility to increase stewardship. Now, my research question focuses on what barriers are impeding local environmental volunteers' ability to engage in environmental work, and what improvements can environmental organizations make to address these obstacles. Now, I had the opportunity to intern with Sound Salmon Solutions, a nonprofit that aims to protect wild salmon through local educational programs and restoration efforts. Aside from this, I also created an online bilingual survey with a total of 32 respondents from the Sound Salmon Solution community emailing list. These survey questions investigated participant exposure and barriers to environmental opportunities. Now, in Figure 1, it's an example of a research survey poster I created to attract participants, which includes a brief description of myself, purpose of the study, QR code, and where to make inquiries. I also analyzed several literature reviews on community engagement practices in the environmental sector to address organizational gaps. Now, as I looked at 2 out of 3 response questions, I created a thematic analysis based on most repeated answers, as we'll see in Figure 2 and 3. Now, my main findings is that the biggest participation obstacle for Sound Salmon Solution community members is time and scheduling at 45%. Now, in Figure 2, I identified 5 key thematic volunteer limitations, which were time, no limitations, lack of info, transport, and age. Time constraints as the dominant barrier highlights the diverse demographics of Sound Salmon Solution volunteers and versatility of work, health, and personal conflicts. This data suggests that targeted scheduling preferences from previous volunteer designs are outdated and require revision. This is supported as an anonymous survey respondent stated, "Time is a big one. I work a lot and in a physically taxing field, so the little time off I get is a chance to rest." We also see this in environmental volunteering literature, where 3 common barriers are time constraints, traveling complications, and lack of resources. As I also looked at the barriers that community members have experienced in accessing environmental resources, 33% of community members responded that they lacked awareness of opportunities. Now, in the 7 key thematic barriers that I identified, which are lack of opportunities, scheduling conflict, environmental education access, financial resources, disability, transport, and no barriers, the frequency of lacking of awareness of opportunities alludes to a larger scale misalignment with outreach methods among environmental groups. Communities are disadvantaged in accessing info or resources if organizational outreach limitations exist. Again, this is supported as another anonymous survey respondent stated that there's not enough information about the events and the ways to help. Now, in Figure 4, I asked Sound Salmon Solution respondents to rate on a Likert scale whether they have accessibility to environmental opportunities. Half of the respondents agreed, but a total of 40.7% felt neutral or disagreed. Now, from the previous outlined barriers and limitations, this can inform respondents' level of disagreement in having equitable access. But what does this mean for suggestions? From the literature review and from the data, I gathered that Sound Salmon Solutions must identify their scheduling flexibility via scheduling survey to increase volunteer turnout at events. And also, environmental groups must understand the barriers challenging their community to shift organizational practices and increase engagement. And also, increasing online outreach for environmental opportunities can positively shape community engagement participation. But what does this mean in the grander scheme of things? Including diverse groups in environmental engagements minimizes disproportionate social barriers. Now, in Figure 5, we see 4 students from the Edmonds Community College at a hatchery event access through their bilingual ecological class. Now, this Edmonds course has improved the accessibility to bilingual environmental resources that would not have otherwise been available. Often, environmental opportunities in the U.S. are English dominant, limiting stewardship participation to groups that have English literacy. This is why it's critical for the adjustment of organizational practices, expanding pathways for environmental understandings. When this is achieved, accessibility to environmental opportunity increases engagement and stewardship commitments. Now, this is important when fostering civic care for the environment as it's essential to uplifting social and ecological harmony. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank my site supervisor, Brittany Alman, and hatchery manager, Megan Moran, alongside my faculty advisor, Tim Bello. Similarly, I want to thank my friends and family for supporting me through my capstone journey, with a final shout out to my partner, Joseph, for supporting my working girl. Thank you.